Welcome to the University of Manchester Students' Union. We are two of the exec officers here at the union, so we help the union to undergo our representative functions so that's within the union, that's to the university, and to local and national government. We represent students' interests, so we're really pleased to be able to welcome Andy Burnham here today. Elliot, do you want to say a bit more?
So one of the things that the Student Union's been working on here is working with other student unions in Manchester to form the Greater Manchester Student Partnership, which is a lobbying group to represent students' voices collectively to city councils and to the mayor. A couple of things that we've been working on. Last year we produced a student manifesto, which we took to the mayoral candidates to get them to sign up to policies that would actually benefit students. This year we're looking at student safety in the city. For example, the Get Me Home Safely campaign, which is about withholding liquor licenses from venues that don't provide free transport for their workers late at night. We're also working to get bus fares reduced for students in Andy Burnham's new B network, as well as challenging the high prices and poor conditions that we see in student housing. We'll bring out Andy Burnham and Rob Parsons.
Thank you very much, both of you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is a chance to ask Mayor Andy Burnham about the things that matter to you. We've got 90 minutes, so I'm going to try and get round as many questions as I can. I have pre-selected a few questions of the dozens that were submitted online, and so I'm going to go, at various points in the evening, I will go to those people and give them a chance to ask their questions, but I want to get round as many people as I possibly can. So you'll be invited to put your hand up, and then I will try and come to as many of you as possible. All I guess I would say is try and keep your questions as short as possible. Be respectful to the mayor, to our guests here, and to the rest of the audience. What I'll also say is we have got some, in the front row, we've got some VIP guests who the mayor may choose to come to help him with some of the questions. We've got the Deputy Mayor, Kate Green. We've got the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, Stephen Watson. We have Peter Bolton from Transport for Greater Manchester, got Caroline Simpson of Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and Dave Russell of the Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. So lots of people who can answer your questions about different aspects of Greater Manchester life. This event is being live streamed on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube, I gather, as well as for everyone here. So let's crack on with it. Andy, is there anything you want to say before we get underway?
No, just thanks to everybody for coming out tonight and to the Students' Union. We work really closely with the Students' Union here and the others across GM, so great that Freshers' Week is over, because we might have looked a bit different this time last week maybe, but hope that went well. But thanks to the university for having us.
Fantastic. Well, let's start with a question from Victoria Taylor-Plain, broadly about public transport in the Northwest. So Victoria asks, steps have been taken in the right direction, but our Northwest public transport system is still woefully dire, with fares increasing, old stock, overcrowding issues, crime affecting people's experience of travel and unreliable services. We've been let down on the promise of having HS2 and the benefits that could bring to the region. What plans do you have to bring our public transport up to scratch to benefit the environment, economy, and quality of life for those in the region, especially with new government now in power? That's quite a broad question.
It's a good one.
Covers a lot. Covers a lot of different things. So, how would you?
Yeah, it's a very fair question, and I know exactly where Victoria is coming from, because lots of people feel the same. I would say when she talks about overcrowding and fares going up, I think that's a reference to the railways. Although the trams can have their moments with overcrowding, I'm not saying they don't, but with fares in Greater Manchester, we've worked really hard to get them as low as we possibly can. So obviously we have a fare cap on the buses now, a £2 cap. We're going to introduce a hopper fare in the new year on the 5th of January, so if you pay your £2, you can have unlimited bus travel for an hour, like London. We're going to cut the cost of student travel next year. We're going to introduce a half-price monthly for 18 to 21-year-olds. And of course, the big vision, Rob, is the B network. So we're on course to complete the re-regulation of buses on the 5th of January next year. So by then, the whole of GM will be yellow. They'll all be under our control. And the reason we can keep fares low is, what does it mean when the buses go yellow? It means we control the fare box, basically. So in the past, the money would have gone out of Greater Manchester to the operators. Now, if people are using the buses, we keep the upside of that, and then we recycle that back into the system to keep the fares low. So that's what London has been doing for decades, and now finally we're going into the same space. The big change as well will be going to a London-style system in March. So that's when, if you go on a bus or a tram, you'll just tap in and tap out with your phone or your card, your bank card, and then there'll be a cap on what you can spend in any given day. So it's hard. All I can say is, from a Greater Manchester point of view, we are bringing in by far the best public transport system outside of London. You could even argue it will be in some ways better than London, because the trams are easier to use. I would say they're nicer to use than the Underground, and all of it then will be at street level, and it will be a really good system. And then from there, we bring 8 rail lines into the B network over the mayoral term. So we've got agreement to do that. So then you'll have, more parts of the system will operate like the B network. It's not ideal in terms of would I like more, of course, but I think we're about to get by far the best public transport system in the country. And the final point to make is, this is beginning to work. So we just went through the first birthday of the B network on the 24th of September. So we've had a full year of regulated services. And what we have found is, in the areas where we have the B network, and it's not yet in the south of the city region, so it's across the north and the west, there has been, we had just shy of 60 million journeys on the B network in the north of the city region over that year. That was a 7 million increase on the deregulated system. So in percentage terms, a 5% increase in bus passengers in the first year of the B network. Why is that so important, and why am I pointing to that so much? Because in the 40 years since buses were deregulated in Greater Manchester in the mid-80s, bus usage went down and down and down and down and down, because the operators kept cutting the routes, putting the fares up, and then fewer people were using them, so they cut more routes and the fares went up even higher. So we were trapped in the wrong cycle of things. And finally, putting new buses on the road, cutting the fares, improving disability access, making a whole range of improvements. Finally, we've seen the first increase in bus patronage. And as the B network full comes through, I think you're just going to see that grow and grow. So I do understand what the question is saying, and there's more to say about transport, but the B network is working. It's improving public transport. It's not fully where I want it to be yet, but it's absolutely on the right path.
Now, you mentioned students and student travel. We've got quite a few questions about student issues, as not surprisingly. So, and one of those is from someone who I hope is in the audience, Jasneet Kaur.
Hi, my name is Jasneet Kaur from the Student Union, President of the University of the Bolton. It's good to see you, Andy, here. So my question is, I'm concerned about the recent increase in the student bus prices under the B network. With the Stagecoach no longer operating, students are facing a financial strain due to the higher cost. Could you consider the reducing student bus passes to make more affordable, and similar to what the Stagecoach offered last year, few years back?
Yes, so it's a fair question. For those who don't know, Stagecoach used to offer a student pass over the three terms, I think is how they did it. And because we're in a slightly complicated situation at the moment, where we have half of Greater Manchester is B network and half is not, and that only changes on the 5th of January, we tried to, I think, negotiate an interim arrangement with Stagecoach so that students could still buy a 3-term pass, but they chose not to do it, and we can't force them to do it. We tried, but we can't force them. However, from January, all of Greater Manchester will be B network, and as I said before, we are not raising fares on the B network We're doing the opposite, actually. We're reducing them. So there'll be that £2 fare, will be a hopper fare, which will benefit people. We're going to reduce weeklies to £20, £80 for a monthly. Not straight away in the new year, but a student pass will be £40 for a monthly. So we're going to give you all the chance to buy half price monthly. So £40 a month, you know, what £1.30 a day, pretty good. And I appreciate it's not in now, and you could say, well, that's frustrating, and I do get that. But we are, you know, working hard to keep the fares down. Here's another alternative that people may want to think about, and I'm quite proud of this. We've just negotiated a deal with our 14 credit unions in Greater Manchester. Anyone can go to a credit union. You look as though you don't know what they are. I'll just explain really quickly. They're like a very local bank that you find in any community. There's a Manchester Credit Union, South Manchester Credit Union will be the nearest ones to here. And what we've done is, sometimes students or people on low incomes can't afford to buy an annual pass because it's quite a big outlay of money. So, to make sure, though, that people who are going to commit to using public transport over the year but can't always find the money to buy an annual, we're going to allow people to get a pass, an annual pass through a credit union by paying £15 a week over the year. So in effect, you can have a weekly pass for £15 if you go and sign up via the credit union and commit to using the B network for a year, because that's the deal, if you like. So we are doing lots of things here to keep prices low. But for those who've just arrived this year, or you know, in your second or third year, and you think, oh, hang on, we had a pass from Stagecoach last year and it's not there anymore. It's just because we're in this interim bit before deregulation ends and B network fully starts in January. So that's an honest answer to the question. But there's plenty of ways in which we're trying to cut the cost of travel. And of course, the B bikes are up and down the Oxford Road corridor, and they are pretty good value for money as well for those who use them.
Good stuff, thank you. Transport is always a big issue whenever I do these things. So shall we see if there are any other transport questions? Sure. There's a gentleman at the back there, sir. Yeah,
hi, Andy. You mentioned there the new bus pass coming in for 18 to 21-year-olds for students. That's amazing. But as this Greater Manchester diverses the amount of students that are arriving, and universities are in a more stressed position as ever, so trying to up numbers, more and more students are above the age of 21. So how are we going to help how are we going to help them with the price of tickets? Because the same pressures on life are no different for people above the age of 21. And also you've got local residents, commuter students who might have saved up for years and years from places like Oldham or Rochdale, who want to be mature students, and they won't reap the benefits of that cheaper bus travel.
Yeah, it's a fair question. And if I could do it all, I would. You know, I would like to bring down the cost of public transport for everybody to sort of the levels that you see in, I don't know, Luxembourg. I think they've almost made it completely free. Germany have cut a cost of a rail ticket to €49 a month. You know, it's like unlimited rail travel. Other countries are doing a lot more than us to really cut the cost of public transport. I think it's a really good policy because it has so many benefits for growth and connecting people with learning, as you say, and opportunity. However, I can only do what I can do with what I've got, and I've got to be fair to people of all ages. The reason I give a free bus pass to 16 to 18s is because, for me, that's a critical moment in people's lives when they're making a judgment about where do they go beyond secondary school. And I don't want anyone growing up in Greater Manchester to say, well, you know, I would have gone to Loretto College or Winstanley College in Wigan, but I couldn't afford to get there. You know, I don't want that to be this case that people are held back by, you know, where they live or the income of their parents. So I'm really committed to that free bus pass for 16 to 18s. But then, as we support people towards apprenticeships or university, you know, we're looking then particularly at that stressed period when people are living on a low income at you know, typically in that period. If I could do more, I would. But one thing just to say is we try and help where we can. So last Friday, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority approved the extension of the free bus pass to young people who've experienced care in Greater Manchester to the age of 25. So if you have been in the care system and you are, you know, living here, you can now have free bus travel until the age of 25. So doesn't directly answer your question, but maybe it does a little, because we're just trying to do what we can to, but it's got to be affordable, and I can't stop throwing sort of offers at people when we can't pay for them. Everything we're saying we can pay for. I think the big final point to make is we all need to lobby together for the same deal for funding of transport here as London has had for generations. You know, they have had big revenue subsidy to pay for. They get much better travel, free from the age of 60, you name it. Bus fares are under £2 for everybody. And I keep asking the question, how is that justified that we have a kind of approach to public transport there that is much cheaper and much better often, but here we're expected to pay higher prices and we're expected to put up sometimes with a worse service. So I am pitching, you won't be surprised, to the current government to say we need a permanent revenue deal for public transport outside of London that will allow us to go even further in reducing the cost of travel in Greater Manchester. We're doing what we can. The innovation with the credit unions I'm really proud of, because we'll hopefully encourage people to go to our credit unions, and then the credit unions might help them with other services. So we're really thinking carefully about it. But can I do everything I would want to? Sadly not at the moment.
Any other transport questions? We have got one over on this side, I think. Go ahead.
Hiya. I was in Berlin over the summer, and I was really interested as a cyclist myself to see how many families were getting onto the transport system with cycles, and it was a really busy place, and they still managed to get cycles onto even the underground and places like that. And I was just wondering, I know there's always been a thing about not using cycles on the trams, and also there's always been a bit of friction, or a lot of friction sometimes, with them using on the trains. I just thought it was a really good way to get people to use the trains and use the cycles as well. Is there any plans, please?
Yes, there are. Generally, I want to get to a situation where there's not rules about public transport. There's got to be some, obviously, and the Chief Constable's here, and we do need rules about people behaving, because safety on public transport is actually I'll be honest with everybody, a bigger issue than perhaps we've sort of seen it as such in the past. It is actually the single biggest reason why people may choose not to travel on bus or tram. And I think we do have to, think much more carefully about just improving people's sense of personal safety when they're using public transport. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you then don't allow people to take their bikes on the tram. We started with dogs on trams, because they were not allowed beyond guide dogs, but I asked TFGM to look at that, because I want a more permissive approach to public transport, that, not making barriers to people to using it, but making it more in tune with their lifestyle. So we do now allow dogs on trams, and there is a pilot ongoing around bikes on trams. And the results so far are really encouraging. Obviously, we don't want to compromise safety, and I didn't mean to imply at the start that there's no overcrowding on trams, because there is overcrowding on trams. So there's possibly ways of doing it, aren't there? There's maybe after peak, weekends. There's different ways of thinking about it, and we're just looking at all of that at this moment in time. So Dame Sarah Story is our active travel commissioner. She's weighed down with gold medals at the moment, so she's had her focus a bit over there, but now she's coming back in our direction, and I know she wants to make progress on that. Just on that safety point, though, Chief Constable and I and Kate speak about this a lot. We're not as safe as we should be in terms of, or people's feelings of safety, Rob, on public transport. I think we all believe there's more we can do. We've increased the uniformed presence on our public transport system. GMP run days of action now on public transport via Operation Avro and Operation Vulcan, and that has been impactful. We are looking at a travel safe live chat, working with GMP live chat to see if we can give people a discreet way of registering concerns if they feel uncomfortable or unsafe when they're out and about. So we're looking at all kinds of things, but the general thing is we've got, by making it more permissive, we can't create a situation where people feel there's more antisocial behaviour or that they're not safe in their personal space. So we're just balancing all of those things, but we want to move in the direction that you're indicating.
Thank you, Andy. We've got one more transport question over at the back there.
Hi, Andy.
Hi.
So just talking about safety again, it's something that keeps coming up for students each year. And I know that you are currently piloting nighttime buses
Yes.
that run beyond 3 a.m. What we're finding is that students aren't feeling safe at night because they can't get transport, Ubers are really expensive, so they can't get home. And we want all students, obviously, to feel safe. So I suppose my question is, do you have plans to go beyond the pilot and roll out nighttime buses on Oxford Road and on Fallowfield as well? And if not, what are the barriers to that? And kind of how can we support in overcoming those barriers as an institution?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So for those who don't know, we've just brought night buses back at the start of September. So they were common in Greater Manchester years ago, but disappeared really as services were deregulated. There are some commercial night bus services in the south of the city region, not completely extensive, but there are some. The early findings from the pilot, so one of the pilots is the V1, which does come up Oxford Road, but goes in the other direction, if you like, towards the west of Greater Manchester. Also the 36 towards Bolton. They've been reasonably well used so far, and they're running hourly through the night. And there haven't been, as far as I'm aware at this moment in time, major reports of problems. I don't think there's been barely any reports, actually. Working with the trade unions, the staff who are operating those services are happy with the way that they're working. So far, so good. Obviously, though, it depends upon people using them. I absolutely believe we will have a very good night bus offer down the Oxford Road corridor, down to Fallowfield, through Rusholme, Burnham, wherever. Route south, I can absolutely see that market. It will depend on all of you using them, of course, because that's what will sustain them in the long run. But my aim would be to have a night bus service going into every borough, towards the main town of every borough, as a sort of minimum night bus offer, and that's what I'm working towards. So we've got one going to Lee, the V1. Bolton is being served by the 36. I want this to carry on, so you've got a radial night bus serving every borough, and hopefully every large town eventually. But we just have to spread the word about them, get people using them. And also this links to what I was saying about, making it easy for people to afford an annual pass. So there's people who work in hospitality, who work in the NHS, who are working through the night. We want to really give confidence to those people to be regular bus users through the early hours as well, to get home from hospitality. Because it's not fair on a hospitality worker who's worked hard until 1 a.m. and then has to get an Uber and loses 2 hours of their wages. We want a night bus system, and I'm sure Kate and the Chief Constable feel the same, that people feel safe enough to use, and that is what we're working towards. But interestingly, just final point, I think in London people feel safe because they've got a bus system that is always well used whatever time of the day or night, pretty much. So there's always a good number of people on their buses. We still have a situation where buses here can be a third full, half maybe, so or even later, much thinner than that. And then I think people have that feeling of, am I safe? When you've got more people using the buses, that lifts the general feeling of safety. So that's what we're getting to. A low fare, high usage bus and public transport system, and we do need your help in building public awareness of that.
Good stuff. Thank you, Andy. So let's move away from transport now and move on to sort of student issues. Obviously, we've got a lot of students in the audience, and we have a question from one of them, who is Shafa Asiri, who is over there. Can we get a mic to her? Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Andy.
Hi there, Shafa.
Rob. As a student, I sometimes feel unsafe in certain areas of the city. What is being done to make Manchester a safer place for young people in the city?
Yeah.
So I guess it's expanding a bit on, talking about safety in night buses to a more general safety point. And we also had a question sort of linked to that from Harriet Gladwell, who I don't think is here, but says, how are you trying to make lives better for students in Manchester? So you could answer either or both of those.
Yes, so it's a very fair question. And I just want to pay tribute, actually, to the student union here and at the other universities, because we've had a lot of discussions about these issues. And some improvements have been made on the back of suggestions from the Students' Union, and we'll continue to work in that way. For instance, we had an anti-spiking initiative that came out of the Students' Union, Reclaim the Streets, very much based around people at this university. We've got sexual violence support service that is we support with the universities. So we've done good things, but I don't think they add up to what you're saying. Good things, but I don't think it adds up to a big enough answer to what you're saying. The big answer is to kind of change the way things are and the way people feel on our streets. And Greater Manchester Police have piloted a new approach to that, where they have gone into particular areas and started to take a sort of much more root and branch approach to removing entrenched criminality. So it started in Cheetham Hill. I don't know if you're aware of this, Operation Vulcan. I think 200 premises were closed down, 1,000 tons of counterfeit goods seized. This is quite a different approach, and it's been recognised with awards, and it's now gone into Piccadilly Gardens, where you're getting then, I'm not saying that solves it for all young people, but you're getting closer then to it starting to change the environment that young people experience in the city. And there again, lots of action around drugs and weapons and much more visible police presence. More difficult, I think, to tackle the issues there, but the commitment is there to tackle those issues. I wonder whether the Chief Constable might want to come in on this point, or Kate, because what we believe is the Operation Vulcan idea could go to other places, and particularly I've had a call from Fallowfield residents to take it to Fallowfield, because there can be a kind of mix of difficult issues, particularly sometimes the student population can be targeted. And I think there is a case for going after some of those issues, and particularly where small numbers of individuals are committing large numbers of crimes or intimidation against students. I think there is a case for that approach. Obviously, it's linked to resources, but our aim is to take that different approach to policing around Greater Manchester, not tolerating stuff anymore, but actually really trying to root out what is making people feel unsafe in their community. So we're not at the end of this yet, but it's certainly the direction of travel that we're going in. And I don't know, Kate or Stephen, whether there's something you want to add to that.
Thank you. Good evening. I won't repeat all that the Mayor said, because I think you've covered it off really neatly, but I would just add to that all the work that we're doing with licensed premises, issues around drink spiking, issues around people being predated upon, particularly in the agenda to tackle violence against women and girls, the presence on the streets, and the approach to preventing people from committing offences in the way that has not always been combated as effectively as it could be. It's also about partnership. So one of the things, of course, particularly amongst students, and students, of course, are supported by security networks within the universities as well as security staff. And I'm particularly interested in the development of things like the Student Safe Zone app and the use of the app and the technologies that allow us to draw down upon support from various quarters. And we, of course, working in a very integrated way with those providers of safety and security, so that our overarching efforts are altogether better. And the very last point that I would make is already things have changed quite dramatically in the sense of the safety of students being particularly preyed upon in terms of being isolated as somebody new to Manchester, being somebody clearly in possession of new IT, in your digs for the first time, people breaking into digs, people following you to cash points, all that sort of thing. Those instances of generic offending is well down, and it's well down because of some really good targeted preventative behaviour, and it's in that space that we'll continue to work as well.
That's a great question. Thank you so much. So I think now is quite a good time to see if anyone's got any questions related to the experience of being a student or a young person in Greater Manchester. We've got a question from the chap over there at the back.
Hiya. At the start of the event, we mentioned the Get Me Home Safely campaign, United Union's campaign. You have previously, announced your support for that campaign, but in the year and a half since you did that, as far as I'm aware, no city councils have adopted those policies, certainly not Manchester City Council. Given, the dangers of people working in the late night economy getting home, are you willing to publicly call on Manchester City Council to begin withholding liquor licences where venues do not provide free transport for their workers with urgency?
Well, I certainly believe that they support the campaign. I mean, we can't go straight to we can't regulate the venues in that way. But we strongly encourage them to do that. But the big response that we've made to the Unite Get Me Home Safely campaign is night buses. That's our big commitment that we've linked back to our signing up to that campaign, and we'll build out the night buses. Now, I appreciate that that's only an option for hospitality workers or NHS or other workers who live west of Greater Manchester at the moment. But as the B network spreads, it's our full intention, as I said before, to take them everywhere. I think one thing I would say, if I can, is something that's come into force this week that the City Council argued for, we argued for, and there's been a trade union campaign about across the country, and that's venues or premises not withholding tips from hospitality staff. And that's a really welcome change that's been made, and I think that does help to a degree. Okay, it's not the same as the venue providing free transport home, but it is something I think that helps in that direction. But I think I agree with you. My daughter has done a lot of work in hospitality, and that example I gave before about you lose 2 or 3 hours of your wages on an Uber, it wasn't just off the top of my head. It was very much, her sort of feeling of frustration on a Sunday morning after she'd been at work all night. I think I would like to see our venues much more arranging with taxi companies to be available to staff for a much more reasonable price rather than an inflated price when everyone's trying to get home. There are things they can do, and there are things they should be doing in my view as a responsible venue. We have a lot of them, but some are less so. But, could we link it to licensing to say you must? I think we've actually looked at that, and legally we can do that, unfortunately. But as to the campaign more broadly, yes, and our big commitment will be the expansion of night buses across GM.
Hi, Andy.
Hiya.
So, as a mature student, one thing I have noticed is the increase of violence against women and girls, which we know is national news. What are you able to do, along with, obviously, the Chief and Crime Commission, Kate is over there, and Mr Watson, Chief Constable, to actually hold things to account? Because a lot of women, when they're reporting these crimes, are ignored, dismissed, or you have police officers trying to force them not to press the charges. Where is that going after the Vera Bird report, especially with the tweets over the weekend, where you had female CIA officers stating that the Vera Bird report was a fairy tale?
Well, no, it's a really important question, and thanks for asking it. It is my job, obviously, to hold Greater Manchester Police to account, and it was my decision with the Deputy Mayor to commission the Baird report because we saw things that concerned us greatly and still do. And it was a hard-hitting report. It really did raise a lot of issues, but a lot of issues that needed to have, to be brought out and to be then discussed and debated. Vera made some very significant recommendations in her report that have already been implemented. I'm interested where that comment comes from. I don't know, Kate may want to say more about this because Kate has been doing some of the direct implementation.
It's your job to fire again.
It's not my job to do all of the... We don't go in and tell the police what to do because that's not the role, and you've got to understand what my and Kate's role is. We hold them to account, and when you raise issues like that, we take them seriously, and Kate will answer. But if you say that we're not taken seriously, I put it to you that the Baird review is evidence of taking it extremely seriously and going to the point of carrying out an in-depth review into the issues affecting custody. Kate, would you like to pick up the specific, because a specific case has been raised here, and I think it's important that you get a direct answer on that specific case.
I mean, obviously, I don't know if the lady is here this evening, and I'm not going to go into details that would breach her right to privacy and confidentiality, but I think we know the case you're talking about, and it is a lady I have met previously and who was in touch with us again over the last few days. We've absolutely, as Andy says, we don't have the responsibility to determine whether or not she should be arrested, whether or not she should be bailed. That would be an operational decision that we can't make. What we have made sure is that the concerns that you've highlighted about what happened over the last few days have now properly been... Let me just tell you where this one's up to. So it's now in the formal complaints process. I have asked to be given regular updates on how the handling of that complaint is progressing. And I'm very, very concerned that the lady's welfare should be of a very high priority. So it sits in the context, I know, of other cases where people have been concerned about arrests that have been made by Greater Manchester Police. As Andy says, they were the catalyst for the Baird report. We've got a substantial number of recommendations now about... Well, look... Well, you have to understand that policing decisions are not something Andy and I are in charge of. So it's really important that we get that concern properly investigated through the complaints process, and that's what I'm following and asking for regular updates to make sure that's advanced as particularly as possible.
Can I add it?
I think probably what's best is that we let this process go through its normal process and we make sure that we get a result that you want as quickly as possible.
Madam, I think you've made your point very clearly. It's definitely been heard, and it looks like it's being looked into. Now, there's quite a few policing-related questions that have come in along similar lines to those we've just heard. Now, we've got one of them is from Veronica Strathin.
Is on the organised crime gang that is Greater Manchester Police, and the criminal in charge who is sat over there is Stephen Watson. Basically...
No, excuse me. That's not acceptable.
Let me finish. I've started. Let me finish. Given the ongoing issues with Greater Manchester Police and apparent resistance of senior leadership to address their force's culture of institutional misogyny, does Andy Burnham believe progress can be made under the current leadership in tackling institutional misogyny, and if not, what can be done about the issue at this stage, and is it time to fire Stephen Watson?
No, is the answer to that, and I don't think it's acceptable what you said at the start, because if there was no progress, then you'd have a cause to say, I'm not doing my job in holding GMP to account. But actually, Kate and I have said tackling violence against women and girls, the treatment of women in our system is a priority. And in response to that, we have seen a major change in Greater Manchester Police in terms of officers being investigated and sacked for such offences. On the current Chief Constable's watch, there has been a major increase in such investigations into sexual misconduct amongst serving officers. There has been a significant increase in the number of successful outcomes in respect of rape cases. There has been quite a significant change in the last few years in relation to these issues, and you can't dismiss what we've said about the Baird review. Other police forces haven't done this. We have done this. We asked Greater Manchester Police to look seriously at the treatment of women within our system, and major recommendations have been made and accepted in relation to strip search, relation to other issues as well. And one in relation to the case that you mentioned, one thing I can say is that it's brought through something that we need to see implemented, and I believe there is a commitment to implement this. Where there is a history where an individual has reported sexual abuse or sexual crime, that going forward, as Vera Baird recommended, should be flagged on the system so that if the police then are coming into contact with that person, the wider story is understood. Because sometimes that hasn't been the case, and hence there's been some inappropriate actions taken. So we have implemented all of those things, and the record, it's not perfect, but it is absolutely improving in rooting out officers who don't have a place in Greater Manchester Police, increasing rape convictions, increasing arrests for domestic abuse and violence. You've got to look at, I'm always ready to take cases that are put to me of where things are wrong. I actually don't turn away from those things. We look at them, and we look at them seriously. But you can't...
Well, okay, madam, you've made your point very clearly.
Yeah, and this is what the question time is for. So what the question time is, what the question time is for. But I don't accept you just shouting statements like that without evidence. We have looked into many complaints that you and others have made over the years, and that is a fact. We don't just dismiss them, we look at them properly. Kate gave you an answer before about the specific case you mentioned. That is being looked at properly. And at Kate's request, that is now in the formal complaint process. We look at things properly. And where things are wrong, we will hold Greater Manchester Police to account, as we did when the Baird review revealed many things that need to change. I am the mayor who commissioned a review into the handling of child sexual exploitation in Greater Manchester. And as a result of that review, arrests have been made, changes have been made. It's not the case that we don't challenge GMP where things are not right. But Kate, there is a big change in relation to prosecution rates, conviction rates for violence against women and girls. And I wonder whether you wanted to add to what I've said.
To Andy, to me, to Stephen Watson, to Greater Manchester Police, and the thousands and thousands of officers and staff who work in Greater Manchester Police who absolutely share the outrage, I'm sure, of everyone in this room at violence against women and girls. And we're seeing the results of the real focus that GMP has been giving to this since Stephen became Chief Constable. As Andy says, we're seeing a higher percentage of rape cases where we're securing justice for the victim. They're solving those cases and getting charges and convictions in court. We are seeing similarly with domestic abuse cases, better outcomes, more cases being solved by Greater Manchester Police. We're seeing fewer domestic violence cases coming through now. I hope that's a sign of the way in which we're keeping more women and girls particularly safe. But I'm also very, very aware that women and girls, and indeed men and boys who are victims of domestic and sexual abuse, should feel confident in reporting cases. And that's something I ask every single time when I meet Greater Manchester Police senior officers and we are scrutinising the data about sexual and domestic violence. Because if what we're seeing is what appears to be a fall, but actually masks the fact that people don't come forward to report cases, that's very concerning. We want these cases to be investigated. We want offenders to be brought to justice. We want everyone to feel safe in their home and when they're out and about.
Madam, can you
I can absolutely assure you that's remaining mine and Andy's priority.
It's clearly very strong feelings about this case and the Baird review in general. I'm going to see if there are any other policing related questions not related to the Baird review, because we've obviously covered that in a bit of detail. Anyone have any other crime and policing questions to ask? Gentleman over there.
I got, after about 3.5 years, a letter effectively caught corrupt, bent, vile police officers out regarding the case with myself. I did explain and brought this up roughly early in the year. We said, oh yeah, we're turning a corner. I got a letter only last week before, effectively telling me not going to take any action against officers that I've caught out, quoted this, that, the other. How can we stand up and say, yeah, we're turning a corner when we're not disciplining officers, when there's hard facts and evidence? You know, I kind of see and hear the girls there with what they've done, and wow, I'm kind of blown away. But hearing we've turned a corner, it's nonsense. Stephen Watson, you're fully aware of my case. You've been copied in. Stephen Taylor's my name. You know, you were paid me $5,000 because you've written to my GP with lies and crimes I did not commit. You know, how can you find that acceptable that you now don't discipline officers that were involved? That's all I'm saying.
Well, I don't know, Stephen, the specifics of your case, and I don't deny anyone's, by the way, the strength of feeling that anyone is expressing, because I do know that there are instances where the treatment of people isn't right, and honestly, we look always, Kate and I discuss them, we look at them, and that is always the approach that we will take. We can't guarantee what the IOPC will do with that, or what, you know, but we do our job in holding people to account. But what you just said about turning the corner, I do need to speak up in favour of GMP under the current Chief Constable's leadership, because there has been a big increase in the number of disciplinary cases coming through the system, particularly actually following the murder of Sarah Everard. There has been a lot more activity in this space. I think a threefold increase, I think, if I've got that right, in the number of disciplinary cases, and actually a very high rate of then action taken by the Chief Constable in relation to those cases and officers being sacked. That is the record in recent times. Now, I'm not going to say that is in your case, you know, because I'm not speaking about every individual case here. All I'm speaking to is the facts as we have them in relation to some of the changes that GMP has been making. And actually, there was an officer or an ex-officer in court in the city only last week because of because of action taken by GMP to root him out.
Thank you, Andy. Any other crime and policing questions while we're on this topic?
So obviously, part of the police complaints procedure is that if you exhaust the police complaints procedure and you're not happy, you can ask Greater Manchester Commander for it, or Kate, as the Deputy Chief Crime Minister, to look at the complaint. And she then draws her own conclusions, whether GMP have done that complaint properly. And she's done that for me herself. Me and Kate have met, and we spoke about this. She did instruct GMP to then reinvestigate the complaint because she felt that it wasn't investigated properly. Greater Manchester Police then wrote back and said, thanks for your recommendations, Kate. We're not going to reinvestigate it. What do you and Mr. Watson and Rhode be able to give his opinion on that, believe about that?
I do have concerns about the process. I mean, I don't think we've ever got police complaints right in this country in terms of the way in which things are handled, because it's a complaint you hear a lot that, you know, it doesn't work as well as it should for people. And I'm going to say it this evening. I think the Independent Office for Police Conduct, to whom complaints go to the kind of final stage, I think it needs significant reform, to be honest. I don't believe it's a process that is quick enough, thorough enough, robust enough. I have concerns about it. And I would certainly say to the current Home Secretary that there needs to be significant reform of police complaints and the IOPC, because I don't think it's working for the public or really bringing people sometimes the justice that is needed. So we only can work within the system that we are in, as well as making the argument for change, as I've just done. But I can only speak as I find, and I will give you an honest answer to what, you know, this is an honest answer. You may, probably some of you might disagree with it, but this is my experience in my 7 years as mayor, and actually my 16 years as a Greater Manchester MP before it. In those 20-ish years before the arrival of the current leadership, I don't think GMP handled things well at all at times. I think it had a defensive culture, and it often was just always pushing things away. Under the current Chief Constable, I believe things have changed quite significantly in that where we ask Stephen to, and the Deputy Chief Constable, Terry, to look at things, they do. Now, I'm not saying that always leads to the outcome people want, but I believe finally Greater Manchester Police are prepared much more now to look themselves in the mirror and make changes where they need to. And that is evidenced by the Baird review and the response to it, and the ongoing process of review we have into child sexual exploitation in Greater Manchester, alongside the Manchester Arena inquiry and other things as well. There is a reason why this is the fastest improving police force in the country, which it is. And there is a reason why we are seeing a change in culture across Greater Manchester Police, which we are at this moment in time. It is not perfect, and that's why we continue to challenge them. But I can point you to the statistics. A GMP is a very different police force today than the one it was a few years ago. But however, some of the past way of handling things still is around in the system and still has created a legacy of difficult issues that we're still trying to work through.
I've had a couple about knife crime and related issues. One of them is from someone who submitted an online question. What are you going to do about crime being partaken by the youth, such as people carrying knives in school and college, many being drug dealers? And there's another related one. What will you do to stop people carrying knives and knife crime? The government appears to be focusing more on stopping them smoking than stabbing each other. So what's going on with knife crime?
I mean, in some ways, backing up what I was just saying about the way GMP polices these days. Now, this may not be popular with everyone, again, in the audience, but with our support, GMP in recent years has been making much greater use of stop and search powers. Now, I know that raises immediate concerns about, are they appropriately used? And obviously those points have just been made. So we have supported that, and there's been a significant increase in the use of those powers. Why is that justified? Well, if more people are carrying weapons, it follows, I think, that more has to be done to apprehend those weapons and remove them from the streets. The thing that has happened is, though there has been an increase in the use of stop and search, the number of complaints about the process of being stopped and searched has not increased. And that suggests that those powers are being used proportionally. Now, I absolutely understand the issue of the disproportionate use of police powers against different communities, particularly black community or black communities or the Asian community in the city region. And those are issues that we watch, Kate and I watch very, very closely indeed. However, something has been done here on knife crime in that our statistics say that the number, although there are still high-profile incidents, Rob, and there's huge public concern, actually the number of incidents has fallen in recent years. And the way we can back that up is the number of young people admitted to A&E with injury through a sharp object has fallen as well. So we can back that up with NHS statistics as well as GMP statistics. So that is what we are doing in relation to that issue. It can be controversial, but it's our job to watch the use of those stop and search powers and ensure they are targeted, done in the right way. Overall, and again, I'm not defending every case or every instance, but overall, they are being used appropriately, and it's had the required effect on knife crime and overall youth violence.
Let's move on to a different issue now. Now, we had a question from Alex Cutler. Is there a foreseeable pathway for young people, presumably in Greater Manchester, aspiring to be homeowners? The current market for housing for young people makes it almost impossible to get on the housing ladder. What's your answer to that?
Well, I know this is a massive question for everybody. It'd be interesting for me just to find out how many students are actually in the hall. So would you just sort of, okay, how many of you would like to stay in Greater Manchester after graduation, if you could, of the people who just had your hand up? Okay. And then how many of you worry whether or not you'd be able to afford to do you have a, yeah, okay, just, sorry, I'm getting a sense of the straw poll. I mean, I've talked to the student union here about a graduate retention strategy. We want you to stay. You know, we love the fact that you're studying here. We want you to stay here. And we could talk about what we're doing around careers as well, if that's of interest. But I know that housing is the biggest single barrier to that, finding, you know, good, affordable housing. And truthfully, if we'd have carried on as we were going a couple of years ago, I think Greater Manchester would be on a path of over-gentrification in a way that people would be forced out and couldn't, you know, find somewhere to live. And what we have done, myself and I say the new leader of Manchester City Council, Bev's been in a couple of years now, but, you know, relatively sort of recent in post, the Mayor of Salford the same, and Manchester and Salford have the greatest pressures. We have brought through a completely new approach to housing in Greater Manchester, where we are looking at the supply of new homes. We are asking the current government to build more, let the councils build more council homes, more social homes, and we have been amongst those arguing for regulation of the private rented market, because it isn't often just the rents that are sort of jacked up unfairly. It's the sort of hidden charges, the deposits kept and people don't give it back. All of that needs looking at. You know, we need a kind of whole system look at housing. And that's what we're beginning to do in Greater Manchester. We are bringing in a Greater Manchester Good Landlord Charter. And some of the student union reps know about this because you've worked with us on it, and we're grateful for that support. We want that charter to cover purpose-built student accommodation as well, by the way, and how the people in the city providing that are looked at and regulated. What we want to do is empower people who are renting in the city to make sure we get a much fairer deal. We think there has to be a big drive on housing standards. Too many homes in the private rented sector, particularly students renting out, there's just no way it's acceptable for some of those properties to be rented out in the condition that they are. We are going to give everyone living in Greater Manchester, going to introduce it progressively in the next couple of years, the right to come to us as a Greater Manchester Combined Authority and say, I want a property check of the place where I'm living because I'm concerned about the condition of it. And we're going to make a commitment to do those checks, working with colleagues, got the Chief Fire Officer here this evening, working with our colleagues in the fire service, but in the councils. We no longer are going to accept that you should be living in our city paying what is actually what you might consider an inflated amount of rent for a situation where you make complaints and they don't reply, you know, they just don't listen, they don't treat you fairly. We've got to call time on that. So big change coming to housing in Greater Manchester. You know, we've been very focused on transport, and I've talked about the B network, but our attention is we're going to go at housing in the same way that we've gone at the B network, root and branch, improving the supply of new homes, improving the standard of homes in the private and the social rented sector and in the purpose-built student accommodation, and having a sort of much more interventionist approach to housing in the city region. Supporting our councils, actually, to build more homes just outside the city. The truth is, if you do want to stay here, and we'd love you to do that, it possibly won't be within your reach to live in the city centre straight away because of the way Manchester is changing, let's be honest. It's becoming, you know, a more desirable place to live. It's a growing city region. What we're seeing, though, in places like Stockport, just outside the city, is they are now seeing a change in their housing market to provide city centre style living, but at a much lower cost. The job is obviously to make the B network good enough so that you can live just outside the city, but still have that quick connectivity to it. And that's a big part of our graduate retention strategy for the city region.
Obviously, as a Labour politician, the current government hasn't said that they're going to abolish right to buy, but are you pressuring the current Prime Minister to abolish the scheme?
Well, yes, I spoke out after the mayoral election on this very issue, and I did put a challenge out there about right to buy, because the facts of the matter are the grip of the housing crisis is tightening in Greater Manchester every year, not loosening, because we are still losing more social rented homes than we are building. So the supply of social rented homes is still shrinking every year. And that is a terrible situation to be in, and we have to break out of that. One of the reasons why councils have kind of got out of the business of building council housing is because of right to buy, in that they cannot justify the public funds to build new homes if those homes can be lost 3, 4, 5 years down the line through right to buy with big discounts. So the argument I made after the mayoral election, and at the time I wasn't, no one else was saying it in Labour, but I said we need a suspension at least of right to buy from new build social and council housing. And to be fair to the government, they've now gone out to consultation on that proposal. And the reason why I think that one works as a first step is because you're not removing the right from anybody, because no one's living, those homes aren't built yet, or they're being built. And therefore, that's a good place to start. Would I support going further on right to buy? I actually would, because I just think, we've got to turn this housing crisis around, and I don't think we can afford to lose homes from the social rented stock when we're in such a dire position. You may not have seen it, but last week we put out a very unique piece of research that we have done on the number of families in Greater Manchester in temporary accommodation. What does that mean? Well, it means kids of quite a young age sometimes in the worst type of bed and breakfast accommodation in the city region. Our councils currently are spending £75 million a year on putting families into somewhere. It's a roof over their head, but it's sometimes not much more than that. And it's not sustainable for them to be spending that much money, and the damage that's done for kids being ripped out of their communities and then ending up in a sometimes quite dangerous living environment. This really needs to change, and change quickly. So I absolutely applaud the thrust of your question. I would personally go further, because we've got to get quickly to the point where we are building more truly affordable homes, council housing, social housing, than we are losing, so that progressively the crisis is easing. It's still getting worse every year. And until we get to that tipping point and we're moving it in the right direction, I think quite serious intervention is needed.
Over to this side now.
Hiya. So I have a question around private landlords. There are a lot of students here will know. A lot of private landlords that are repeat offenders, especially estate agents, that are repeat offenders of unlivable houses, bad housing situations, inflated rents, lack of support to their tenants. And a lot of the seasoned students here or recent graduates will know to avoid these landlords. However,
do you know the names of them out of interest between you as students? Do you?
Barak Estates.
Okay.
Floor space. There's loads.
There's a lot of them.
And there are actually resources that have been made by students for students about, landlords that shouldn't be approached. But this is a very student-led project. My question, however, is, because these are still predatory to new students that are unaware, or even students that have simply run out of options, and even though they know the dangers of renting with these people, they'll have to rent with them. Is there any plan to sanction them, remove them from the market, or, make them commit to providing better accommodation and not harming students anymore?
Well, really brilliant question, and yes is the answer to that. And I'm open to working with you. I don't know whether there's a new students' union elected. There is, yeah. I'm absolutely open to a piece of work with you on that, because as I said before, the Greater Manchester Good Landlord Charter is coming in now. And that is, if you could say, it's a voluntary vehicle. So it's a choice for landlords. Do they go with that or do they not? But bear in mind, there's legislation coming through Parliament as well that's starting to sort of create a foundation on which the Charter will rest. They've got a choice now, I would say, landlords. Landlords in this city region, let me be really plain about this, including those who rent out to students, they have a choice. Are they going with the kind of improvement programme? Are they going with that agenda? Or are they going to try and stand outside of it and do what they have done? I know they've done it for years, and we all know sometimes how poor some of the accommodation that students have to live in can be. So we are aware of it. But this is why we're doing what we're doing. Is it their choice to say, no, I'm going to try and rent out homes that are just really not fit for any habitation, and certainly not fit for young people to live in? If they choose the latter, what I'm saying is we're coming after those landlords. We're not going to let people do it. This is the city region where a 2-year-old boy was killed by the damp and mould in his home, and that is shameful in this day and age. It can't just be accepted anymore that landlords can just rake it in and, oh, well, you keep complaining to me about the damp and mould or the cracked window or the this, that, not bothered. It's just not going to be an option anymore. I can't promise that we can just go in and sort it all overnight. But where there are big players who've got multiple properties, we are going to confront them with that choice. And if you want to work with me on that, I'm willing to work with you on that. Come and see me. Give me the names of them. Let's start. The Good Landlord Charter should go straight to where the biggest problem is. And that's what this is all about. And if they won't sign, they are almost saying that we're not prepared to be a good landlord. So they're making their choice, and then we'll make our choice, which is to go after them.
Hi, hello. With the recent University of Manchester redevelopment of the Fallowfield campus, we've been told that it won't reach the NUS affordability guidelines. How do you expect student rents to be affordable if the education bodies won't provide reasonable housing at reasonable costs as they prioritise private partner investments?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I'm not aware of that. That's a new development that this university is bringing through. And it won't meet the affordability. This is for undergraduates, is it? Yeah. Well, I'll have to raise that with the new Vice-Chancellor. I'm not aware that that is the situation. I was aware last year that we had students sent out of the city region because there wasn't sufficient housing for them, and obviously we can't have that. But it's not good if new housing stock's coming through that is, as you say, outside of the affordability range. So there's a new opportunity, isn't there, to have a conversation with the incoming Vice-Chancellor. So all I can say to you is let me, via perhaps the Students' Union, have the details of that, and I will raise it with the new Vice-Chancellor.
Last one on housing. Any more before we go to the lady down there?
Are you still committed to writing a student living and staying strategy?
Yes. Yep. Thank you for asking. The 18 to 21 new bus, well, it would be a B network pass, is obviously part of that. Even though we've not put the strategy fully out there, it's one of the proposals of it. If you know, or the kind of the outputs, if you like, of the strategy. So that will be coming through in 2025, and that is about student living, isn't it? How do we make it better for you living in the city? Some of what the Chief Constable and I were saying before about safety, that is part of a good student living strategy. The work I just offered to do with your colleagues at the back, again, really going at poor housing. I would think that's probably the top issue that we need to address as part of a meaningful student living strategy for Greater Manchester. The reason why it's not come through as quickly is the City Council was doing one separately, and we've just got to coordinate between my organisation, Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and the City Council. But that work's being done. Beyond that, we want a student staying strategy as well. So what can we do to persuade you to stay here? And it's around affordable housing. Or, as again was said at the back, is there something more we can do in the year after you graduate? Could we give you a B network offer as our sort of statement to you that please stay, you know, because we want you to. You know, so I'm open to those kind of ideas as we finalise that would be the student retention, student staying strategy, to call it that. So I'm absolutely committed to doing that. If I look at the Greater Manchester economy right now, one of the biggest risks to it is the vacancy rate in our economy. There are good graduate jobs across the Greater Manchester economy, particularly across the city centre. One of the things that could threaten the progress that we've made is if we can't fill those vacancies. I think we've got to get better at getting information to you as you are coming through your undergraduate years, helping you see those job opportunities, offering perhaps some support to retrain if your degree course doesn't give you all of the help that you need, maybe some IT provision that might help get you ready for some of those vacancies. That is all in scope for the strategy. And you know, I think there's a really exciting piece of work to be done there. Just so everyone knows, Greater Manchester is currently growing faster than the UK economy, and we're predicted to carry on growing faster than the UK economy in the next 5 years. So you know, we need you, we want you to stay here, but we've really got to show it with the quality of what we put in front of you. The jobs are there, more jobs are coming. The housing issue, I appreciate, is one we've got to crack, as well as other incentives to stay. But yeah, we're going to work with you on that, and hopefully in this academic year that will be something that we can sign off together.
So, talking about the jobs, Sophie, what's your question?
Hi, Sophie.
Hi, Andy. So with big shifts in the skills and knowledge we'll need in the future workplace and the rapid increase in automation, what's being done to set our children up for future success?
Okay, thank you. So the big reform that we've got on is called the Greater Manchester Baccalaureate. And that is creating an equal alternative to the university route. Now, I appreciate I'm talking to a university audience here, but if you cast your mind back to your school days, I think everyone might remember, and I certainly remember it in my school days, things sometimes are so oriented to the university route, it's not fair to those who are looking for something different. And while it's a great thing to go to university, 2/3 of young people growing up in Greater Manchester don't go to university. And I personally don't feel we do enough for them in terms of what's the path for them through school, into post-16, and then into a good job with good technical qualifications to support them. So that is, in effect, the Greater Manchester Baccalaureate. And we are really moving forward with creating it. We just launched a thing. Actually, it's relevant to you as well, though. We're not making a real demarcation here. If somebody's on the university route who wants to go towards the technical route, that's fine. There's no split here, or vice versa. We just launched a thing in the last 2 weeks called Beeline. So it's on a website called the Greater Manchester Apprenticeships and Careers Service. If you go on there and look at it, many of the jobs are relevant to graduates as well, or people who will soon graduate. What we've done, it's an innovative thing, but for the first, we've identified 7 areas of the Greater Manchester economy where we think the most good jobs will be now and in the future. Digital and tech, obviously, but the green economy, public services, you'll know the kind of areas that creative culture and sport as well. Got a lot of jobs in that area. For the very first time, a 14-year-old in Greater Manchester can go onto that website, follow through the kind of advice at the different ages, but actually click and see the jobs currently being advertised at the end of that gateway in Greater Manchester. See the average salary and the average number of vacancies in that particular field or that particular role. That's a level of visibility that those kids have never, ever had before. And I believe they get quite outdated or quite poor advice from school. And what we're saying is, give them visibility. I keep saying this, but it's true as to where Greater Manchester is. Young people growing up here can see the skyscrapers from their bedroom window, but they can't see a path for them to those places, and they don't think of it as their world. And that's where Greater Manchester currently is right now, I think. The minute we do give them a meaningful path to those places, to the apprenticeships there, the degree apprenticeships, and all the opportunities, then I think this city region punches its weight in a way it's never really done in my lifetime. But it's all about having that visibility, the line of sight to the opportunity. We give them that free bus pass, and it goes for all 16 to 18-year-olds, just to say to them at 16, we believe in you, in your potential and what you can contribute to this city region. So we're slowly putting in place the building blocks of a system that says, from our point of view, at 14, when you're making your choices as your options, you've got two routes here, the traditional university route with the traditional GCSEs, or there's an alternative route. And this is not an inferior route. I hate to say it to this audience, it could take them to the same level qualification, but without the debt that comes from going on the traditional university route. And for a lot of our young people in Greater Manchester, that will be seen as a superior route to them, or it will be certainly a more doable route for them. So that's what we're on with doing. Take a look at the Beeline innovation, because you will see how that is a bit of a game changer. When it comes, all of a sudden, the modern economy is visible to them in a way that's never been visible to them before. And I think it starts with that. If you can't see it, you can't be it, and all of that.
Hiya, Andy. So kind of related to the skills and tech point you were making there. I'm currently working with Liverpool Combined Authority and their digital inclusion team, and I was kind of wondering what Greater Manchester are doing in terms of digital inclusion and equipping young people with the skills to enter that ever-changing job market now, and kind of how you're lobbying national government and Westminster into the importance of digital inclusion and eradicating digital poverty.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and well done on the work you're doing. You should be doing it here, not down the M62 anyway, but we'll hopefully persuade you to do it here at some point. Well, one of the things with the MBAC, this is the thing. Did many of you take the English baccalaureate when you were at school? Is that something that, the GCSEs, yeah, quite a few nods there. And this is the quite traditional university Russell Group GCSEs, the history, geography, languages, alongside obviously English, maths, science. What we're saying with the MBAC, we're trying to send a different message at 14. And this is where, under the last government, the Department for Education didn't like this very much. But the problem was they only had a message to some students, not one for all students. And what we did with the MBAC was say, well, we're not, in our city region, going to say anything other than ICT, computer science, or a digital course is something you should be doing at 14. If you want to get yourself ready to be employed, you should be taking a digital or an ICT course. Now, I think computer science GCSE is not the best, but we need to get better digital qualifications at that age. And then I would say we need, as part of the MBAC, even if you're not taking that as beyond secondary school, we said that should be English, maths, digital. You should do the three as an absolute core, and then choices on the top of that. So we changed the message to young people, number one. But then I would say we need to keep offering a digital component, whatever course you're studying at A-level or T-level or BTEC. Always there should be an offer to have digital literacy alongside that. There's a kind of startup university in Greater Manchester called UA92. Gary Neville and others were behind it. And sometimes disruptive organisations can actually really say something profound to the established world. They are offering a digital course as part of every single degree course. And I think every university should be doing that, or at least giving you the choice of doing a free digital course as part of your degree course to get you ready for the world of work that is Greater Manchester today if you want to stay here. So I do think we've got to challenge the existing and traditional education system, because I don't perceive the English baccalaureate to be preparing young people for the world of work. They exclude the creative subjects. This is a creative city. To say that music, drama, art and design are second rate, well, they're not here. So we changed the message about that. To say that engineering is not a good enough GCSE to be in the English baccalaureate, well, it is here. So many jobs here are linked to engineering. So we have changed the message, and we do put a lot of money into digital inclusion as well. But it sounds like you're doing brilliant work. We believe it's critical to the success of the MBAC.
We've got 1 minute. Super quick question. We'll try and get Andy to answer it.
What are you going to do with trying to make services within Greater Manchester, so in the councils, and trying to make them within the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. So that could be the housing, to try to make a whole Greater Manchester housing, except from having it locally, and like more services, more basically run by the Greater Manchester Combined Authority to save money as well.
It's a really good question, and we're starting to move more in that direction with the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, making some investments then that help save money for the 10 councils. So one of those examples is on children's social care, where the councils have all been operating individually and placing young people sometimes outside of Greater Manchester because of a lack of accommodation. Well, we've created an approach now where we're going to invest in new provision so that all young people can stay within Greater Manchester and the cost of it all can come down. On housing, I've got a commitment to 10,000 new council homes within this mayoral term, at least 1,000 in every borough. It's possible that some of those could be built and operated by the if you like, the landlord could be the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. I'm not saying we've finally worked that out, but it's possible. We could move in this direction to try and kind of take some of the financial pressure off our councils. Some things need to be better coordinated across the 10 councils, and that's a little bit how Greater Manchester is developing at this moment in time. We're not going to take the decisions off them because they've got to make the decisions in their area, but there are things we could do to cut some of the waste and make things a bit more standardised. We're looking at things like standard taxi licensing across Greater Manchester, for instance. That's a kind of thing that we're looking at doing. So it's a really good question. But with just a final point, Rob, we're moving to a new funding arrangement with the government from April, where we will get a block of funding more like Wales or Scotland, and we will then have much more ability to do things our way, and that will probably mean doing things that help our councils a bit more. So doing things to sort out that temporary accommodation issue. Or a big thing we're going to be saying tomorrow is we're calling on the government to change the benefit system so that employment support is not the big budget we kind of spend as a country on employment support through the likes of Serco or Atos or Capita. We're saying, going forward, route that through the Combined Authority. Because if you gave us that money, we would spend that through our local community and voluntary organisations. So we would route that money into our communities, and then we would have a situation where our councils had a much more resilient voluntary and community sector supporting their work in the communities. And that's a big announcement, a bit of a sneak preview, but that's a big announcement we're making tomorrow. That is our next big, we're always like sort of going for our next big pitch and where next with Greater Manchester Devolution. I want a radical change to the benefit system, moving away from the tick box sanctions approach that kind of leaves people feeling very negative about themselves and it doesn't get people towards work. We're saying take that money, not changing the benefit rates because that's got to be set nationally, but the support element, route that through us, and we will create a much more localised, personalised system that will really help our councils because it will really build out their community and voluntary infrastructure in the community. So, it's a long answer to a really good question. That's how Greater Manchester is developing right now. I hope you find some of what I've said interesting tonight. The B network is the big innovation that's coming through, and you can see that, and it will be completed in January, and we will go to that full London-style system. For those from London, you might feel a bit more at home come March next year because then we're going to have that tap-in, tap-out capped system. We are digging into the housing issues, and I promise you we're going to have more to say to you about that as we go forward. The MBAC is a radical reform to education. We'll all live in a better society if every young person comes through feeling they've got a path in life and some hope in terms of where they're going. And I just mentioned a massive change to the way the benefit system, it doesn't work at the moment. We want to make it work for people. So this is how Greater Manchester Devolution is trying to change the country, bring through new ideas that Westminster has never seemingly managed to do. And I hope we're getting somewhere, but we can always be challenged to go further. So thanks for your questions tonight. Thanks for coming, and we'll take on board a lot of what's been said and work with you to make this place an even better place to live. Thank you very much, and thanks to you, Rob, for hosting it.
Okay. Cheers, Andy.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.